And welcome to At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. With the shooting Sunday night of 59 in Las Vegas, gun control issues have come to the forefront once again. The same night that 59 died in Las Vegas, 3 died in Lawrence, Kansas. It didn't get any publicity because of Las Vegas, but there was a mass shooting of 5 people. 2 were injured, 3 were killed. And to discuss gun control issues and gun rights, we have with us the Executive Director of the Illinois State Rifle Association. He is Richard Pearson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
You were with us 5 years ago, I believe.
5 years ago.
Yeah. And I thank you again for coming over and visiting with us. The first thing first is I want to extend my deepest sympathy to the families and the victims of the shooting in both Lawrence and in Las Vegas. And to you, Richard?
Of course. As a gun owner and the head of a gun rights organization, our sympathy goes out to those people and the wounded and those that got trampled and all the devastation that has happened and will continue to happen for years in some people's lives.
When you say continue to happen, why do you say that?
Well, because sometimes when people have one of these events, they never get over it. And there will be people among those that will not get over it. None will forget it, but many will not get over it.
And with regard to this particular shooting, and I will not mention any names of the perpetrators intentionally, but with regard to the Las Vegas shooting, and then it was about a year ago that the Pulse Club in Orlando, 49, those are the 2 worst mass shootings in U.S. history. Before that, Virginia Tech, 32 people, Sandy Hook, 26, Killeen, Texas, that was the Luby's Cafeteria, 22 people. All of those happening since the turn of the century. Do you see any way that that's going to subside at least?
Well, we have a very diverse culture that the United States lives in, and we have a great deal of crime in the United States. And I think that this is going to happen from time to time, and I don't know that there's any way to stop it.
There are those who suggest that stricter gun control legislation would at least help to limit the number of mass shootings. Is there something that the Illinois State Rifle Association might support that would lead towards stricter gun legislation?
Well, if stricter gun legislation would help, we would support it. But stricter gun legislation is not going to help a madman. It's not going to help a religious fanatic. Those kind of people are out of control, and they want to kill people. If we looked at the killer in Las Vegas, he had ammonium nitrate, explosives. He had this stuff everywhere. He was bound to kill people, and if you're bound to kill people, you're going to do it.
He had 23 weapons in the hotel room. He had shooting platforms. He had bipods and tripods. He had scopes.
Right.
He was out for bear, so to speak.
Right. He was there to kill people. To what point, I don't know what he was trying to make. I don't know that anybody does or that we ever will. But when if you look into his history, his father was declared a dangerous person.
He was on the FBI top 10 list.
Right. Yeah. And so it kind of runs in the family, I suppose. And he has a brother left. I feel very sorry for that guy. Jeez, But anyhow, you're going to have these things, and people who are determined to die in the process of killing others are hard to stop.
Before we go into some of the legislation that already exists, some of the rules that gun owners have to follow, let's go back and take a look at the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution and take a look at the actual words that are part of the Second Amendment. And it reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." How wide-sweeping is that statement?
Well, you have to take it in the context of the times. That's very wide-sweeping, because everyone from 16 to 60 every male was determined to be in the militia at that time. well regulated meant you had to drill once a year. So it was
So everyone 16 to 60 was out
there.
on drill with a weapon.
once a year, maybe.
But you still stand by the Second Amendment today, even though some of that term, I mean, militia, we don't really refer to militia today.
Well, technically, we, all of us, all of those who are 16 to 60, I've now graduated
Moi aussi.
from the militia. It's still determined to mean that, except now that we also include women.
Let's talk about being the executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association. Let's talk about Illinois law.
Okay.
Let's start with the firearms owner identification card. What does that mean? What does it allow?
Okay. A firearm owner's identification card was passed in 1968. Okay. It registers every law-abiding firearm owner as a firearm owner. We are approaching 2,250,000 of those in the state. When you consider that most of those are adults, that's about 20% of the population right there. Okay, so there's a lot of us. Okay, the FOID card allows you to purchase regular firearms, not Class 3 firearms like this guy used in Las Vegas. It allows you to purchase ammunition, to transport the firearm, and to use it for self-defense in your own home. Okay, the FOID card, a person who has a FOID card goes through 360 background checks a year. I, as a FOID card holder, go through a background check every night except Thanksgiving night, Christmas night, New Year's night, Easter evening, and 4th of July night.
And when you say a background check, I assume we're referring to a computer scan?
Of all records in the country that pertain to firearm ownership, or in Illinois, mental health. That's also included.
So there are certain things that might happen that would then signal with a red flag to the authorities that Mr. Pearson no longer qualifies to hold a FOID card?
Exactly. When that happens, there's a stop put on your FOID card. You can no longer purchase firearms or ammunition. You immediately get notice that your firearms must be surrendered to the police or a person who is responsible, but also must have a FOID card.
For instance, what types of checks might raise that red flag? What might they find?
Well, if you were admitted to a mental health facility, if you had a order of protection against you, if you were arrested if you're arrested for drunk driving and it's over a certain limit.
Domestic abuse?
Domestic abuse is absolute, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what is allowed in Illinois by law? If you have a FOID card, what kind of weapon can you purchase?
Well, you can purchase handguns, rifles, and shotguns. You can't purchase fully automatic firearms. They're illegal in the state of Illinois. Only police departments and the military can purchase those.
Semi-automatic is okay.
Semi-automatic is okay. Right.
There's been discussion about assault weapons. What's the difference between an assault weapon and an automatic weapon?
Well, an assault weapon is an automatic weapon. Okay. There are things that look like assault weapons, but they aren't. They just look that way. Okay. I like to equate it. If I go out and I buy a brand new Camaro, and I buy all the stickers that a famous racer has on his car, and I put them on my Camaro, I'm still not a race car. It's just a Camaro. And so that's really the difference between those. The full auto firearms are expensive, requires a federal tax stamp to have them, But even if you have that federal tax stamp, you can't own them in Illinois.
Now, there's a ban on most dangerous weapons. What might constitute a dangerous
I
weapon?
don't know.
Well, but I assume something like a rocket-propelled grenade.
Oh,
for
sure. Well,
instance.
those are all called Class 3 firearms, or Class 3 weapons, I'm sorry. So things like grenades, bandolier torpedoes, cannons, all that sort of stuff. You can have a Civil War cannon. It doesn't go very far, but all the other things you cannot have.
Is there a limit on ammunition, either
No.
type or volume?
There's some limits on armor-piercing ammunition, but the amount of ammunition, there's no limit on.
So let's talk about this, and if we pop up a screen here that shows some numbers in the United States compared to other industrialized nations. And these numbers represent the number of homicides by gun in the industrialized nations per 100,000 population. And the US is tops at 2.7 per 100,000 population. Canada and Greece are next at 0.5, Italy 0.4, Switzerland and the Netherlands and France 0.2, Australia, Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom at 0.1. So the United States has many more victims of mass shootings and gun violence per 100,000 than any other industrialized nation.
True. Yeah.
That obviously would concern you, I assume.
It is, but you have to look at the numbers. Those numbers also include suicides. And so suicide by firearm is one of the ways that people kill themselves in the United States. In other countries, they kill themselves in other ways, but they still get the job done. But anyway, so that is also included in there. The United States also is unique in that its history is different than the rest of the world. It's also unique in the huge amount of drug problems that the United States has and the gangs that go with it. If you look at the city of Chicago, which is a good close example, they have constant shootings. Almost all of these are gang related. We actually interviewed in committee in Springfield a Chicago detective, and the question was asked of him, how many people have you arrested with a FOID card in your years? And he'd been there 25 years or something like that. He said, well, I've never arrested anybody with a FOID card. So all these people are criminals. They're engaged in criminal activities, and it's like black market drugs or anything else. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're criminals. It doesn't matter what law you pass. They're not going to obey them if it doesn't suit them.
So there is no law that you know of that the Illinois State Rifle Association could support that would be lend itself toward more strict gun control?
That would help. The answer is yes. There was none.
So it's illegal gun sales that are of much more concern to you.
Right. And the punishment of those people. For example, we did a study, and the number one plea bargain thing that's done in the city of Chicago, in the Cook County courts, is you get somebody's arrested with an illegal firearm and they're a legal firearm owner, okay? That's the first thing plea bargained away. The first thing. Very few. In 2007, they arrested and charged one person out of the city of Chicago with that crime, and it was a guy that came home from the service and didn't know he needed a FOID card.
Is there, I mean, so I assume you're suggesting that we be a little bit more strict with looking at those kinds of issues and not plea bargaining away.
We can't plea bargain all this stuff away. If you constantly plea bargain things away, then there's no teeth in the law. I have a friend of mine. I talked to him last April, and he, we'll say, retired from the Chicago Police Department and took a job with another police agency, a federal police agency. He arrested a 14-year-old kid with a handgun, appeared against him in court. The judge released him with no counseling, no time, no probation. If you keep doing things like that, the law doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't the law require at least minimum penalties that the judge has to adhere to? I mean, if he can just cast aside all of those suggested penalties.
That's what they do. For example, if it starts out as illegal use of weapons, okay, and the judge decides to change the charge to trespassing, that's what happens.
So the law is no longer applicable in that particular case
Right,
because
exactly.
you changed the charge.
So we just changed the rules, so the law no longer applies.
What other solutions might help if we were to abide by stricter guidelines with regard to the plea bargains, et cetera? Does the State Rifle Association have other suggestions as to how we might limit the number of, at least the use of illegal weapons?
One of the things that has proven to be true is that if a person is sentenced, that they complete their sentence, okay? Not 85% of it, not 65% of it, complete the entire sentence. When those people are off the street longer, the number of killings and the number of crimes go down.
And all you have to do is fund that.
That's right. But what's cheaper? See, the state of Illinois, or maybe a municipality, looks and says, wow, we spent $10 million on the jail, but if we let these people out, we'll only have to spend $8 million on the jail, okay? What about the damage they cause to other people out there? Some of it, like the shooter in Las Vegas, people will never get over. They'll never forget. How do you put a monetary value on that when you let these people out of jail? I can't do it, and I don't think anybody else can do it, but we know that it's real. We know that, if you talk about things like it's only property, so they damage your car. But you still have to come up with the $500 deductible or whatever it is, or maybe some coverage not in certain cases that don't apply. And so all that cost then is hidden because it's passed along to the citizens. If you put them in jail and you keep them there, it's a higher cost, but maybe a lower cost to each individual citizen, or at least to certain individual citizens.
Let's turn to the question of mental health. 5 of the top 10 perpetrators, the 5 of the perpetrators in the most horrendous mass shootings in U.S. history had mental health issues.
Right.
Is the Illinois State Rifle Association, do you have suggestions as to how to help with regard to mental health?
How long do we have?
About 8 more minutes.
Okay, well, let's put it real quick. First of all, the Illinois State Rifle Association, Illinois is one of the few states that does mental health background checks in your FOID card and gun purchase. Okay, so we supported that. But beyond that, the topic of mental health, the mental health is an underfunded part of our budget. We have individuals in this country, in this state, who need mental health. They closed the Zeller Zone Center. Then they said you could go to psychiatrists and psychologists for help, and then after that they stopped paying those people. So all of a sudden we wind up with all these people who have mental health issues, who are out here on the street. We call them homeless people in some cases, but in a lot of cases they're a lot more dangerous than that, and that topic needs to be dealt with in this state. And we spend money on everything else, but I think that is one of the most important things that we need to spend money on is mental health. And we have no choice, or well, we do have a choice apparently because we're not doing it, but as a moral factor, we should help these people. These people need our help, and we are letting them go, and they sleep under the bridge, and we look at them and say, oh, homeless people. But there's more to it than that.
And how on earth do they get access to weapons?
Well, not all have access to weapons. That's certainly true. But if you buy it illegally or illicitly, or you go down and you buy it out of some guy's trunk, in the parking lot somewhere, there's no background check on that. Criminals don't have a background check when they illegally carry concealed. Criminals don't have a background check on anything because they don't care. Okay? And so when you pass these laws, gun laws, the people that it affects is the law-abiding gun owner. It has no effect on crime. We would like it to have an effect on crime, but it doesn't work that way.
Let's talk about legislation on the national level. There's the Sportsman Heritage and Recreational Enhancement Act, it's, called SHARE.
SHARE, right. Mm-hmm.
Can you, just in real brief terms, can you explain what SHARE would do?
Well, it's quite, well, first of all, it opens public lands to hunting and recreational shooting, which is a big problem in the West. Okay, fishermen can't fish, hunters can't hunt, because that was closed down in a previous administration. So that opens that up. And this time it's legislated. It's just not at the whim of the president or the Department of Interior. In with that is also part of the Hearing Protection Act went over there. So the so-called suppressors, some people call them silencers, but they're not silencers. They're suppressors, can be owned by people. And so all that does is reduce the decibel level of a shot. But we have these police departments that say, well, what about the shot spotter, which is where you'll have gunfire, it tells you where it is. The shot spotter still operates with a suppressor because it doesn't stop all the sound. It just reduces it so it's less dangerous for the individual.
And meaning that it would harm their hearing if they were to use a suppressor.
Right. And so it you know, if you look at me closely here, I've got a lovely hearing aid. So, and I'm sure some of that came from shooting, but most of it came from tremendous ear infections when I was a kid. So, anyway, the idea is to protect the hearing of the sportsman. So
the SHARE Act has not passed Congress yet.
No.
It was tabled after the shooting of Steve Scalise practicing for the baseball game, the congressional baseball game. And I believe it was to come up for a vote this week or next week.
Well, it's out of committee.
It's out of committee.
All right, it's out of committee.
And so we don't know what its status is right now.
Well, I think we're going to see it pretty soon. Okay, so it'll pass through the House. My prediction is it'll get stalled in the Senate. That's my own personal feeling about it. But it'll pass the House. But I don't know that it's going to make it through the Senate.
Richard Hudson, who's a North Carolina Republican, had proposed to allow concealed carry permit holders to take guns across state lines, a national legislation.
Right.
What is the legislation with regard to concealed carry in Illinois?
Well, we the legislation regarding concealed carry, as far as that goes, we do. It's called reciprocity, so we don't have reciprocity with any other state. So, but other states recognize our permits. 26 other states recognize our permits. Okay, because we have the highest level of training in the nation. One of the reasons that we don't recognize this permits from other states is because of the mental health background check issue. Now, some states like Tennessee actually do that, but it's reported differently than it is in the state, so that becomes a problem with the state of Illinois accepting it, even though it does happen there. So the reciprocity issue can only probably be solved by national legislation. That may not solve the problem either, by the way, because there's all kinds of things that have to go in that for each state. But there would be a start. If you look at the number of permits, there's 16.5 million permits in the United States right now.
Concealed carry permits.
Right, concealed carry permits. The crime rate of those is like 0.00002%. It's the people who are firearm owners, law-abiding, legitimate firearm owners, concealed carry permit holders, almost never get in the crime. The most common one is drunken driving, and they lose their permit, but hardly anything else.
Real quickly, there are those who will say that the more people who have guns, the safer we'll be as a nation. Do you adhere to that philosophy?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes. One of the things that happens when you have concealed carry legislation, I go and I get my permit, then I educate my family and friends about gun safety, and I may not have known before. So it's actually caused gun safety to be taught more and more throughout the state.
And with that, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for the discussion. Richard Pearson, who's the Executive Director of the Illinois State Rifle Association, thank you for being on At Issue.
And thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Next week, we'll be back with another edition of At Issue. This time, we'll be talking about school finances. We'll have Unit 5 and Peoria Public School representatives on this program. Join us for the next At Issue.